Well, peace and blessing, Hunter chilling. We're so glad that Hunter to join. We one more again for zooming in on sustainability. This year, the Queen Quet head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. And like we always do, right, and thing like that, we know we can't take no stand if we ain't behind this line. So the first thing we always do is pay homage to not only God, what make the shuffle we stand for and thing like that, and yam from and thing like that, but rather us do this year for we ancestors and things who be there for the rest of people and things like that. All the children of Mother Africa, when they're going around the world, they be know it be wrong. When they're the Bahrain thing, when they say flat and thing like that, they know they ain't be cracky like that, because they've been the one who make up the board and thing, and been going all around and do trade and thing like that. Rather was the one will be there all through the part where 100 children Yeti boat now, and they call them Central America and thing like that, will come up into North America. Because you know, if Hunter just going back, there's a book called Came for Columbus. You see the old making thing like that. Will look more like we and like these are the rest of children we celebrate, you see. There's some of them what the cracky teeth now and say that they are somehow. So this your day, let me take a moment of silence for the indigenous people around the world, especially the indigenous woman or the freedom fighter for the land or the whole bunny culture and thing like that, and still take a stand. Ashe, ashe, ashe. We're so glad for day one more again and thing like that from the Gullah Geechee Nation, especially on this year day, March 10th, the anniversary of the Gullah Geechee Fishing Association. So I have to say peace and blessing to all 100 children with part the association and thing like that, where they still hold on we tradition and thing like that. Now, you might say, well, if you live there on the land and the water and thing like that, that's just what you do, any. I mean, you say hold upon them, but what else? Well, look at everybody with a DA and the Gullah Geechee Nation from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, ain't know nothing but no fishing. Everybody with the in a farming and thing like that. And rather was, they ain't for us to know what we up against for them thing. Well, Hunter got climate change declining, the tip the land and thing like that with the salt water. We want the salt water for day we supposed to day and not come from the land, you see. But then when I've been going out yonder, the west side and thing like that, where we other as a family, where y'all get about called Seminole be. That when I truly get this appreciation for water. Even though yeah, we say the water to bring we, the water going to take we back. Plenty of people ain't first know what that mean. Tell you did it, where he pour some people water and thing like that, and none did it tall. Yeah, eye opening y'all. So for all of you to truly understand the value of taking a stand for indigenous land, I'm going to speak like this because I know I have viewers and listeners all around the world. And so many times I'm asked, what is this thing about being indigenous? Are Gullah Geechees indigenous to North America? Gullah Geechees are indigenous to the Sea Islands, and that comes in two different ways. It is because although our African ancestors were enslaved on the Sea Islands from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, they were not all from one ethnic group. Therefore, they didn't just simply continue living in a new place doing what they were from the various African countries that they were kidnapped from. So when they amalgamated the various traditions and cultures, they did it in Sea Island sand. From the Sea Island sand emerged Gullah Geechee culture. So Gullah Geechee culture is indigenous to the southeastern region of North America, in particular, the Sea Islands and what's called the Low Country, the Coastal Empire, the Golden Isles, and Northeastern Florida. Now, why did I say there's two ways? Because to be indigenous means it comes from that place. It is native to that place. So the other aspect is there's Kusabo, Yemisi, Adisto, Cree, all of these who were the other set of folks that were already here that the Africans engaged with even prior to chattel enslavement. And in 1500s, we know that there were African people on my home island, Santa Elena, St. Helena, way before the British came along and started enslaving folks here. Then we know along the PD River region, we had Africans that went in to the woods, into the wilderness, down the creeks, and fought back, escaped from that potential enslavement. They then intermarried, like many other Gullah Geechees did, including my family members. All right, we have close, full-blooded Indigenous Americans in both sides of my family. So many Gullah Geechees have both what some might call Native American or Indigenous American ancestry, as well as African ancestry. Now, there's a lot of mythology out there on the internet, and I would recommend that there's going to be some other discussions on some other shows about the dispelling the mythology, where people try to take our names from the Geechee River and all this type of stuff and try to transform the word Gullah, which was the overall name for many of the indigenous people that were in the Southeast, and say that's where Gullah came from. That's not where Gullah came from. That's not where Gullah came from. It's not a twist of Gullah. So that discussion, written about it many, many times and talked about it many, many times. You can go to gullahgeechee.biz, gullahgeechee.biz, and get We Be Gullah Geechee, get the legacy of Igbo landing, Gullah roots of African American culture. And those will help to really inform you on the real legacy of the culture and the cultural traditions here, and to really understand the ingenuity of the Gullah Geechees of my island, St. Helena Island. Go to St. Helena and spell out St. Helena, gullahgeechee.com. And you will learn a lot more about the various ethnic groups and how they got combined. Well, one of them that I mentioned at the very beginning of the show and always pay homage to are the ones called Seminoles. These were the unconquerable people. These were the Africans and the indigenous people that fought alongside each other. But when you research the word Seminole, it came from the Spaniards, who also were enslaving people, that then started to call them wild and exiled, meaning they could not hold them down. These are Gullah Geechee people, because when you look at the writings of the Europeans about who they were fighting for 40 years in their so-called Seminole War, it actually was the Gullah Wars, because they state clearly there are more, quote, Negroes in this war than there are Indians. And again, we know they were calling the people who were already in North America Indians, because Lost Boys, I call them, had thought he landed in India, not in what the colonists ended up calling the New World. Well, to really have a new world, we got to break down this mythology and this miseducation and this inaccuracy that's been presented about African people, and trying to say that we're not indigenous to places. When I go to the United Nations, there are people from just about every nation you could think of that are there fighting for their rights in an indigenous people's forum. Why? Because again, their culture grew from a particular place. In the case of the Seminoles, you're talking about Africans and indigenous people being a band of people fighting back to protect themselves and to be free. Now, did that relationship remain sustained? In some cases, yes, there were marriages, there were families with both bloodlines, but did they keep the land? Many of them went across. They went into Mexico. They went into Texas. They ended up staying there, and we still have Gullah Geechee that crack and teeth like they shove it. They throw in a leave it. ¿Qué pasa ahora to do? You see, they throw in some Spanish with it as a result of their migration. We go to Bahamas. There are folks there called Seminoles, but they're actually Gullah Geechees as well. We can talk about the Americans in Trinidad at another date. And their legacy as Gullah Geechees. We can talk about Nova Scotia at another date and the legacy there. So within the African diaspora, there's a Gullah Geechee diaspora, but there is a connection to Mother Africa and to this sea island sand and this land. Now, many of the people that we honor and whose land we have treaties with in the Gullah Geechee Nation, they're not on this land anymore, or you can't physically see them because of the intermarriages. But then there are other indigenous people that I've met in my migrations, even out to another place where our Seminole or Afro Seminole or Black Seminole family is still fighting for their rights to get back officially into their quote unquote tribes when they were voted out because of the fact that they were Black. That at once the US government got involved and said, hey, we'll cut you a check, you know, but you can't own that set of folk. Now, all of a sudden, who were called the Seminole freedmen, they try to say were enslaved people, that they weren't just part of the family. We got to end the mythology. We got to end the foolishness. So, when my journey to Oklahoma, I didn't get an opportunity to meet other folks who were also classified as Native American or Indigenous American. And I've been to all 50 states. But the blessed moment that I met indigenous people from a myriad of places gathered together was actually on another island, Hawaii. And one of the people that stood with me, and you see the circle behind me, that was a ceremony that we ended up doing, a sacred ceremony in honor of the land, in honor of the people, in honor of the people taking a stand, because Hawaii also had a queen like the Gullah Geechee Nation has. But Hawaii's queen was duped, overthrown. Reminds me often of Nzinga, who, because of Angola, where the word Gullah comes out of, as well as Gola comes from the Gola people of Sierra Leone and Liberia area, the Windward Coast, Rice Coast area. When I think about what happened with Nzinga, I think about what happened with the Queen there in Hawaii. And while I was there, paid homage to her, wanted to learn more about her story, her legacy of having an independent nation turn into a territory. Well, today I want to talk to someone who comes from two indigenous groups by bloodline. So like me, with having African ancestry and indigenous ancestry, she has two sets of indigenous ancestry going through her veins and through her acculturation. Kickapoo is one of them. I know some of you, when you hear that name, you probably are like a little like, really? That's a name? Yes, it is. And Shawnee. Now, where she is today is where I said I've been, but didn't get an opportunity to meet the indigenous people there. But I met her out here, where y'all see behind me, in Hawaii. And that is Paulette Blanchard. And since the time that Paulette and I stood together in Hawaii in this circle, our circle has broadened. We have seen each other at the National Adaptation Forum. We have stood together in the face of a number of issues, including these climate impacts that are impacting our culture and traditions. But we have had opportunities to speak the truth within especially academic arenas that are the ones who proliferate the colonizer's story and not the story of the people. So for Women's Her Story Month, I wanted to bring on a variety of women here on Zooming In on Sustainability. And I thought, let me bring Paulette to the microphone so that our people can know a bit more about her people and this journey, because we both stand in different points in this fight for indigenous rights. So peace, Paulette. How honored to do.
Haki Hawesi Lasamamo. Thank you so much, Nyawe, for inviting me, and the honor is mine getting to know you and hear you speak and tell your truths. The very first time I saw you speak was at a American Association of Geography meeting in Tampa, Florida.
You were there. I didn't even know that. Okay.
I was fresh out of tribal college, and you were one of the sessions where you started in full regalia, and then were like little pieces of you came off throughout your entire story. And I was like, that is amazing.
Yeah.
And it was, yes, I see Brittany says she was there too. Yeah, it was amazing.
Right. So now tell me this. So we've been journeying together a long time. I just didn't know. I just didn't realize until we got there to Hawaii with Rising Voices. Now I know you were part of the planners for Rising Voices. Were you still in tribal college at that time as well?
Well, my relationship with UCAR-NCAR precedes Rising Voices. When I was at Haskell Indian Nations University, where I got my bachelor's degree with Dr. Daniel Wildcat and so many other mentors I have came out of tribal college. But Dan Wildcat started the Indigenous Peoples Climate Change Working Group back in 2006 with Winona LaDuke. It was the second series of Native Peoples, Native Homelands what is it? It's like a report, I think. And so the first one was in 1996, and then the second one was in 2006. So those two reports were kind of this foreshadowing of the work we're still trying to get through to the power holders in our social structures. And so the Indigenous Peoples Climate Change Working Group is where I got exposed to learning more about the injustice of our environment and our responsibility over rights to caring for our environments, our more than human relatives and such. So then it was through that process that Rising Voices tried to fill a gap where there was not a lot of non-Native scientists building relationships with Indigenous peoples to include them in the discussions that often related to the policies that affect these Indigenous peoples. So the working group worked with tribal colleges, and Rising Voices tried to work with non-Native science institutions to create spaces where we could communicate. And so as Rising Voices has grown, it has changed so much in positive ways and created more of a center for Indigenous and Earth Sciences now, instead of just a program of meeting and networking and exchanging and trying to help ideas become research projects, which then again become adaptation for communities that are relevant to them and their places. So it's been a big journey.
Yeah, a long road. We walking a long road here.
That keeps crossing.
Yeah, and it keeps the paths of crossing. So let's talk about this, because when you say tribal college and you go into tribal college and you look like you look, right? How is that? What do you live on a reservation? And if you live on a reservation, why? Like we would say, welcome. How did your people end up on a reservation, and where did they migrate from to end up there? So how does that work? And then we're going to branch into this discussion about non-Native folks studying what really applies to Indigenous people.
Right. Well, traditionally, our origin stories say we came from across the waters during a flood, and landed in the Great Lakes, Southern Great Lakes region, or around kind of the northeastern parts of the Great Lakes too, because we are related to the Cree and Ojibwe and the Kickapoo, the Sac-and-Fox, the Lenape. So we are related to this larger group that have a shared dialect called the Algonquin. My people have been linked genetically to the Fort ancient people, the mound builders of the Great Lakes and Mississippi regions up there around Cahokia and to the northeast. And so we are originally from, or are places that the colonizers boundaried us was around the Ohio and Tennessee River valleys. We were a trades tribe, so we moved a lot. We lived in longhouses, and we had large cities at different points. We had multiple cities along the Ohio River, and we had 5 divisions that were our political divisions: your peace, your war, your chief groups, your medicine people, so we had a very complex social construct and political construct and economic construct, because we would use the rivers as our highways and exchange with tribes from up in Canada, which were our other relatives, and tribes that came up and down the Mississippi River. And we explored, we traveled a lot. So interesting story, and is part of the reason that we got moved out of that area was the colonists kept encroaching on our land and squatting, and we would fight and they would remove. So we had a treaty with King George before the revolution, and that if the colonists wouldn't come over across the past a point of the Appalachian Mountains, we wouldn't kill them.
I see.
Simple. And so that worked for a little while, and then the French and Indian War came out, and we fought with the French, which made us have a relationship with the United States government that came later much strained. And we were forcefully removed and chased. And you've heard of Tecumseh, that our chief that tried to unite, as many tribes as possible to create our own lands. We are Tecumseh's people. We are actually the group that followed the absentee. Sorry, my dog just jumped. The absentee Shawnee tribe is the branch of the Shawnee that fought the hardest and the longest against assimilation, against reservation. So we moved all over the place for many years, fighting everywhere we went, falling timbers, and Tippecanoe were battles that didn't always go so well for us. And eventually part of our tribe settled in Oklahoma, and then part of it went down to Mexico to try to establish a free nation to be themselves. And so now we're in Oklahoma on allotments and under trust of the government, and trying to make ends meet here in 150 years of living with the gas and oil industry.
I got you, but that's a critical word. You just said trust. Okay. Because when I've gone to the Indigenous Peoples Forum, I've been, as you know, at the National Adaptation Forum, and even wanted to get in a round table with different Indigenous groups of people. And what I found is that there is a distrust or disrespect for people. When they look like me, they don't want to engage in conversation, but then they will engage in these conversations with government entities, right? And then you end up in another set of treaties, like you said, that put you so-called in a trust position. But then I've also worked with the National Park Service and seen the National Park Service get sued by Indigenous groups because they actually could not be trusted, because funds that were supposed to go to the particular group never got there. Account suddenly was switched around. How is that gone? Even you mentioned oil now. We've seen major battles over them trying to cut through these lands. You already been, like you said, you've been fighting all along. You've been fighting everywhere you move, just like, the Gullah Geechees, who are now called Seminoles. You fight and you move, you fight, you move, you settle somewhere, and all of a sudden, we found something on that land too. So we want to extract it. We want to mine it out. And we're fighting sand mines here now. We fought offshore drilling where we are. We've supported the efforts out there where you all are to stop these pipelines from cutting through. So it's this ongoing battle. But how is it? You and I have shared a few conversations. The last one with AGU, you made some critical statements in regard to, as the word you keep mentioning, colonizers and the mentality of them to come in. First, looking like they want to build trust with the Indigenous people there, especially now in the midst of a pandemic, the traditional knowledge that they want to again mine out and extract and then used for other purposes, which usually ends up being a purpose to exploit it for cash, not to use it to heal anybody, not to keep anybody on their land, but actually to find methods and mechanisms by which people can then attempt to sell the native people's practices, the indigenous people's practices, while the indigenous people are still fighting to hold on to their languages, their land, their culture, their traditions. So how is it that now, you know, like I know what the academic world is like, you're in it, you know what the political world is like, you're in it. With this, how do you find a balance with that? And what do you say from your side of it, being a set of people that didn't just get to stay right where you were? That wasn't part of your nature anyway. Your tribe, like you said, moved up and down and traded and moved, where mine uses the rivers to trade and exchange, but go back to their particular island and stay there. What is it that you would say to folks who are saying, well, how do you have trust? How can you trust the US federal government, knowing all of what you know and knowing the historic legacy of this constant battle against indigenous rights and land ownership and so forth?
Yeah, well, you can't disassemble the master's house with the master's tools, right? You know,
Right.
it's we have, my great grandmother used to tell me, you have to infiltrate the infidels. You she used to
Wise
tell
woman.
me when I was a little girl, because I used to cry because, you know, I'm, my mom's half and my grandpa's full-blooded, and you know, this whole dissecting us by blood quantum and not recognizing us by culture, language, identity, land base, all of these other things is an internal fight as well as a political external fight. So there's a constant bantering back and forth within the community on who's indigenous enough and what that means and how that is embodied. I'm unapologetically Shawnee. I don't care what other people's assumptions are. I know who I am. I can trace my lineage back hundreds, at least a couple hundred years. And then on and into France from one of those relatives even further back, because you know they liked paper and, you know, papering their people like animals back then. So today the fight is much, it's not over. And the hard part is that my tribe is struggling with its own identity between being assimilated Indians and using what they've learned from the government and practicing their government fashioned after the United States government, which has the same problems, small as they do large, you know, money disappearing and so on and so forth. And our land base is checkerboarded, and the trust relationship means the government can change its mind on us. You know, my personal family's land was taken back by the Army Corps of Engineers, and they put a lake on it. You know, can I throw a houseboat out there and live forever? No, because they gave me a couple of pennies on the dollar, or my family, and said, you know, go away.
Wow.
And so, you know, between the gas and oil industry polluting the land, the water, the air, which therefore pollutes the plants, the animals, and the humans and everything else, there are tribes that can't grow organic food anymore. There are tribes that have high cancer rates because of lead poisoning. We have more Superfund sites on tribal lands in the United States than anywhere else. They'll hide them from the wealthier whites, and in the urban spaces, nestle them in the Latino, Latinx, African American, and other immigrant regions, in environmental racism, essentially. And they do the same, they've been doing the same thing to tribes for years. Look at the Navajo Nation with the uranium mining, and you know, your nation even fighting. We're all trying to survive the dumping grounds that become our, you know, we're stewards of the land. We should be able to magically fix it or something. I don't know where they get these ideas, but no, we're dying.
I hear what you're saying, that the whole thing with cancer alleys and things like that in Jacksonville, Florida, for instance, that is the most polluted zip code in the United States, they told us. And so when you mention Superfund sites, it automatically resonates. When, you know, Brunswick, Georgia is another place. We have a Superfund site here. And then people wonder why Queen Quet is adamant about not having oil, not having big factories, on sea islands and on the coast. And because the words, the buzzword is on job, right?
Right.
We're going to bring jobs, but are you bringing jobs that are going to lower the quality of life of the people to the point where you lower it unto death? Like you're saying, where they're going to work for pennies and then suffer and die from cancer because these folks who already destroyed Europe a long time ago, which is why they started, going elsewhere too. You destroy an environment one place and you move to another place, but you're who you are wherever you go. So if you are not acculturated to be a steward of the land, but instead to feel that you should conquer and colonize the land and any people you find there already and claim nobody was here and you discovered something, then that continues to this moment based on what you said. And it always leaves bodies lying in their wake. Wouldn't you say the same?
Oh, absolutely. And there's no accountability. Um, there's supposed to be a legal trust responsibility of the federal government through treaties with the tribes. We're supposed to have health. We're supposed to have education. We're supposed to be able to fish and hunt in our traditional fishing and hunting places.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just sugarcoating of the same terrible yuck that is not going to change. And it's all, we're force fed this lie across the entire land, Turtle Island and beyond, about the settlers and all of this stuff. And people, how many people don't know the difference between an immigrant, a colonizer, a settler colonizer, and an indigenous person? I mean, at least an immigrant will try to learn the culture of the land that they move to, keeping parts of themselves. A colonizer, they just take it over and leave. A settler colonizer takes it over, does what they want, and doesn't leave. And then the indigenous people here are still trying to, like, whoa, we got tens of thousands of years of knowledge of place and relationships with these relatives that you're calling resources, and you trespass our lands like you trespass our women's bodies, like it's yours to dispose of at will. And so we have these high rates of crime and violence and suicide and rape. I mean, Native women have the highest per capita, have the highest rate of rape than any demographic, but because our numbers are low, we are erased from every poll, every statistic, every
done. You're not on it. Yeah, I've never even heard that before. I've heard the rest of what you said in terms of drugs and alcohol and all that, but I've never heard this before about rape. But again, that
Sarah Deer.
Yeah.
She writes prolifically.
Okay. All right. Have to look into her writings, because when you say rape, there is a song that I've danced to. I haven't danced to it in some years now, but I've danced to it several times at environmental events, and in particular with Earthwise Productions. And it is a song called Rape of the World. So again, when we're talking about what you say, I just call them all colonizers in regard to us as African people. But when you say the settler colonizers, that's part of that. That's part and parcel. We rape the women, we enslave the children that they give birth to. We also rape and pillage the land. Herein lies the problem. So now let's move to where we are right now with that problem. Climate change and all the other stuff you mentioned still going on. Still wanting to mine over here, frack over there, do all the so-called discovery, but yet and still the earth is changing. The dryness of the earth, that especially coming out toward where you all are, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, I live here on a sea island in the Atlantic Ocean, and creeks and rivers are all around. But when I went to reconnect with our Seminole kinfolk out west, out to Texas, I could not believe that we were driving from one part of Texas to another part of Texas, crossing bridges, and then I'd look down for water and there was nothing there. And I'm going, what? And then we'd go to cross another one and I'd look on the sign and it would say the such and such river Then as we get to the bridge, I look down again, there's no water. And I'm going, wait a minute. And when I got to where I was going and actually presented and told them how I was shocked by a couple of things. One, y'all got bridges naming signs with rivers and there's no river there, and they fell out laughing. I said, and also the fact that there are really birds running around out here that are like the ones that I saw in the cartoons. Didn't know that they were real. And then, everybody was just cracking up like you just did about that. But I was like, wow, again, you see things and people will fictionalize them. They will either just have to totally racial, not write about us at all, not publish stories about it at all, or turn you into a cartoon so that way it looks like it's legend. It looks like it's something for child's play. But this rape of the earth is not for child's play. This attempt to, as you rape the earth, erase the people who are the stewards of the earth is unacceptable. And so again, when we talk about rising voices, I love the name of the group from the beginning. When I got the invitation to come, I was like, any set of folks whose voices are rising to fight back against this, I'm down. Yes, get me a ticket. I'm on my way. I got suitcase, we'll travel. And so my thing is, here it is, like the road runner, running through the desert now where water used to be, running up the Capitol Hill to argue these issues in steps, what you said earlier, these new found relationships where the same set of colonizer settlers want to couple themselves with, like you mentioned, tribal colleges. They want to couple themselves with, we have a Gullah Geechee sustainability think tank. They want to come in to extract knowledge. How do you deal with that kind of, you're right on that border. You're in that two world atmosphere. People would look at you unsuspecting. They wouldn't look at you and go, oh, this indigenous person or this a Kickapoo. No, they're just gonna look at you and be like, oh, okay, Paula.
Another white girl, yeah. Another white girl pretending, yeah.
There you go. So now you get in, you're in the colleges, you're also in environmental meetings, you're in discussions. How do you hold on to the sacred for the people to use to be stewards again in the future, and not just give away what we call give away your golden tortoise when you already know, you've clearly articulated it here today, you know who you're dealing with. How do you do that? Again, we back to the word trust.
Yeah, well, first and foremost is I don't care what they think because I have the same education they do, so they're not better than me anymore. Number two, I not today, colonizer. That's one of my favorite things. Not today. No, that's not happening. And no, I will gatekeep for my community. I will gatekeep for another community if it means protecting their traditional knowledge or sacred knowledge. There's some knowledges with knowledge comes responsibility, not power. Right. Power right. is a dream, but the responsibility is very real. And right. So when we quit equating knowledge with superiority or power, then we start realizing that there's a responsibility, and teaching that responsibility and reminding these scientists that are willing to learn, willing to hear how to be different, willing to themselves advocate on your behalf, creating space and then stepping back and letting you fill that space. That is what Rising Voices is working very hard to do, is make the invisible visible, allowing our voices to rise. And we don't need them to legitimize our science and our knowledges.
Say that again.
We do not need the Western system to legitimize our knowledges or our sciences.
Thank you so much. I just wanted you to say that. I heard you clearly. I wanted to make sure my audience heard you clearly, because I've been arguing that point for years. When people say, who allowed you all to have your own nation? God. Who gave you the authority to do this or that? We did. We don't have to be legitimized by a white group of people, a European group of people, a
Who are,
Western set of people.
they're only 500 years from thinking the world was flat. We know as Indigenous people it was round. We saw the shadow of the earth go across the moon. We've been watching the stars for tens of thousands of years and understanding cycles and patterns. That's why the circle was sacred. We understood that. So whenever there's a room of scientists getting all a little toity, I'm just like, remind them, y'all are a baby science. You can't even figure out how they did the pyramids.
Oh, well, let's don't go there now. See where you go. See, Paulette, you trying to start something. You just wanted to try to start something with me, Paulette. Don't go there with me with the pyramids. Don't go there, Paulette.
They're beautiful, sacred, and white people can't figure them out.
No, and you know full well it's not about them trying to figure it out. What they can't handle is if you told the truth about it, you'd have to say African people built this. African people started science. And that's what they can't do, because if you do that, it unravels everything else, right?
And sorry, but Jesus wasn't white.
No. Okay, you went there. See, you're gonna keep going, right? I told that before in the show. Is African. How you gonna be born on the continent of Africa and not be African? That is insane. So again, we know that there's the erasure. There's always the attempt at the erasure. Now with media, it's on rapid fire, the erasure. Right. Because they'll Photoshop you in and out of someplace in a minute. They'll make some type of video and bleach me out and darken you. They'll just, do it all to try to make the story not be what the story really is, all to not give credit to the people who actually did the work. And that's always the problem. Yeah.
Because our existence threatens their legitimacy.
That's it. Right. Exactly. And now on that note, as women, because this is Women's Her Story Month, our legitimacy threatens, our real legitimacy threatens their thought of legitimacy when you mention this positioning of power. I see a lot of people this year, for the first time, they celebrated International Women's Day, where, of course, I've known about International Women's Day for many, many years now, and have, been a part of celebrations at the UN level and things like that. How did you celebrate International Women's Her Story Day, and how are you celebrating amongst your fellow or circle of women, I should say, your circle of women within your community? How are you celebrating this time? Or does it make a difference? Do you just simply celebrate yourselves as Indigenous women at all times?
That would be the latter, yes. I am constantly trying to elevate people, women around me, trans people, two-spirit peoples, elevate their voice and their needs. I constantly try to elevate my community, the women in my community, because we are the backbone while the men were the jawbone, of our struggles. And women have always been the last line of defense to the survival of our nations, not only as water carriers and the bearer of our future and children, but also as the medicine keepers and food. Food is medicine. How you, in the things you put in your body responds to. So there's every single day I honor the sacred of women, not only in just myself, but in honoring others and recognizing that, I come from a bilineal tribe. The men were not superior. We were equitable. We were just. We each had the feminine and masculine parts of our social constructs of, I don't want to say jobs per se, but things that, like the women handled the blood of life, where the men handled the blood of death. Women nurtured food, men killed and took life for food. And so there's this balance, this nurturing. That didn't say that I couldn't go hunt, because I do hunt. I'm terrible at sewing, but I'm good at, better at dressing out a deer. And those things are part of how we balance these gender fluid identities, and those people that are in between spaces are two-spirit relatives. and the spectrum that they identify with. Those are all part of the natural being of our existence. You know, they're not freaks, they're not accidents, they're blessings, because we have to learn from each and every one of our community members. And the women have always been the power holders in the way of the future, I guess, the last line of defense.
It's interesting that we would be the first ones that bring everyone into the world and be the last line of defense, right? At the same time.
Wow. Yeah. Good way to put that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. And it's deep, because what you just said, I've never heard that terminology to describe what I've always called just simply a balanced community, a balanced circle, that we don't come from a hierarchy within the Gullah Geechee Nation, because I always point out the same things you just said. In my mother's household, there was no, oh, the boys do this and the girls do that. She said, do it, period. You see what I'm saying? So everybody had to do what you had to do. Now, quite naturally, as you just said, the men in the family generally would be the ones that are hunters. So my father would be very happy right now to know I'm talking to you. God bless the dead. He would be elated to hear that I'm talking to another woman that don't mind handling a gun, because he is all about hunting, and deers were his thing. You know, I have the deer head, still one of the biggest ones that he had mounted. And then I saw these little antlers one day, and I was like, wait a minute, where'd those come from? But that looks like a doe. He was like, I shoot the doe, the window, anything that's running out there. And I thought, oh, you got jokes, right? So, but that was his thing. And so in my family, you know, hunting and fishing, but then the herbology is there and the midwifery is there. And like you said, the women would deal more with the blood of life, with the midwifery, catch the baby and thing like that, and shake the baby, handle that. But then with the going to kill the deer and skinning the deers and skinning the rabbits and whatever, then that's my father and the uncles and the granddads and the cousins. And so, you know, here in the Gullah Geechee Nation, we have only a few more of our Gullah Geechee deer hunters that still hunt on horseback. But we have a whole lot of them that are in hunting clubs still holding that tradition. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, today is actually the 11th anniversary of the Gullah Geechee Fishing Association. And I'm a founding member of it in honor of my mother and my grand aunts and everybody else who went fishing as well. And we still do. We go casting. So we farm, we fish, we hunt. And again, as a statement is often said, a nation can rise no higher than its women. So the woman being the front line and the final line of defense is that you defend the family by what you teach the family, what you instill in the family, what you birth into your children, the way that you live your traditions, your culture, and the knowledge that you put in their DNA at first, but you put into their hearts and their souls as they grow. So that's that nurturing element that, yes, when it all comes down to it though, if the men ain't home, like I tell folks, we ain't about to starve. We ain't about to be hungry out here. All right. We know what to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so with climate change being more prevalent and becoming more of an issue, one of my research, one of the chapters of my dissertation are about how women have been the leaders of environmental justice movements like Idle No More. Standing Rock was started by the youth and by women and held down by the elder women, no less. And so more and more frequently, we're seeing women on the front lines of activism and advocacy and even, you know, academic advocacy like myself. You know, I'm trying to fight them with both the sword and the pen, because, you know, you can't trust them, the policymakers and lawmakers. And so you have to fight both sometimes physically and sometimes in literary to make change. And the saddest part is they're still struggling to wrap their head around. We are fighting for all of our relations, not just my people or your people, but all of our relations, including those without a voice, which are the plants, the animals, the trees. That's an indigenous feminism, because we're already equal with the men. We don't want to be just like them. We've already got our own things going on, but we need to be the voice for those that have no voice and that have agency agency and deserve a right to exist as they are. Like a Hawaiian holy man told me, the raindrop has a right to return to the sea. Who are we to stop it? You know, so those kinds of mentalities that women and elder women especially have started, not only in environmental justice, but in reproductive justice and in food security and food sovereignty. And women are the seed carriers. Women are the pollinators in many other ways too, you know, and nurture those seeds and the heirloom seeds and the traditions and songs that go with it. And, you know, we sing to the plant. So, you know, it's not just the carbon dioxide that comes from our exhale, but it's the vibration of our voice and the dance on the ground that the plants feel. That they speak to each other through vibrations. They communicate through chemical releases and such, so, and gases like the carbon dioxide. So it's incredibly important that we remember the relatedness we have to our environment.
Absolutely. And that relatedness to the environment and to each other, that I always tell people, the land is our family and the waterway is our bloodline. So for us in the Gullah Geechee Nation, it's about living in balance and harmony with all living things, all living beings. And so it's so critical that we are at a critical hour where others are trying to catch up to that and want to try to extract that knowledge that for us comes naturally. As the word goes nowadays, it's organic, right? To
Right.
live that way, which it is the way it should be. So with that in mind, because I know we have some folks here with us today, we have folks that are going to watch this later on gullahgeechee.tv. Y'all go ahead, subscribe for free to gullahgeechee.tv. Y'all be able to watch this and view it again and share it and talk about it. Tell me again, I'm going to go back to where we began and where we've touched on throughout. How would we build trust between different nations of people that we are fighting for land and we're fighting to hold on to traditional culture and to live in balance with the earth? How do we do that? Because like I said to you before, I've walked into meetings and many of the so-called ones that are classified as the civilized tribes of the US are uncivilized toward me, probably because of the way I look. So they don't embrace, they don't open the circle. But the circle of women often has a whole different behavior. The circle opens up right away when we know that there's that spirit and energy that we are all here to make sure that our children's children's children still know our language, still know our songs, still know those herbs, still know how to hold on to them, still know how to heal, and still know how to have that balance. What would you say, especially to the women activists, especially the ones who are classified now as BIPOC activists that are out here standing, fighting, holding on, even though somebody might not report on it in their media, in his story, their story doesn't get told? What would you say to them about being able to continue to challenge the so-called status quo and the colonizer myths?
Oh gosh, that's so much to unpack in that, those multiple questions. Because I mean, first and foremost, Native people are still wounded. We're still fighting for our own land that we did not cede back to the government. We are still fighting to prove that we are alive, that we're not gone, we're not extinct. We're still trying to tell people not all Indians lived in teepees, and we're still trying to tell people, you know, that water is life. You know,
Yeah.
for 300, 400, 500 years now, we've been trying to teach the colonizers and the settlers how to live in a good way. And here we are, 2021. You know, we're not any clearer on educating them. So first and foremost, quit waiting for them to catch up. We have to just together move forward. Now, how do we together move forward? That's a lot of kitchen table discourse. That's a lot of block parties and inviting people to come eat and share food, share life, share medicine, you know, share medicine with one another, and build the relationships of reciprocity, respect, understand the relatedness and the responsibility that comes with those things. there's how are things being redistributed in the community after such a meeting? You know, what are the media, what are the ways in which we're taking our stories that we exchange or create and sharing them throughout all of our communities? You know, more of understanding and learning from each other on a relationship, you know, because we have to have relationships, because our environment is not a thing, it's a who. They have personalities, they have characteristics, just as our human relatives do. So we need to build relationships that are such, not just with each other, but with the environment as well. And that reciprocity, relatedness, responsibility, you know, I've been working on a 7R format, 7Rs of Indigenous research that also encompass how to have a basic framework for non-Native people to understand how to engage with etiquette and protocol in a good way, so that they're not just being rude and extractive. You know, quit with the transactional relationships.
Right.
You know, we just got to move past that and have relationships that are real, you know. And it's just time and just tenacity, because we only fail when we quit trying.
That's
And
right.
I'm 100%, you know, I want to help you and your community and all of us, you know, because my whole job is all of our relations,
Mhm.
all of them. And so as a climate scientist, as a geographer, as an Indigenous woman, as a Shawnee woman, as a mom and a grandmom, you know, I have to be a good relative. I have to honor my ancestors, and everything I do is in those contexts, the 7 generations thinking. Am I honoring my grandparents behind me? And am I planning to leave something for those yet to come whom I'll never meet? Those are my responsibilities beyond, you know, my job, my, you know, whatever. The cultural component is the future and the past connected. And, you know, I'm just in that centerpiece for now and passing the baton forward. So our communities have to work together. Our histories need to be told truthfully. Once we can start teaching the teachers that teach in our K through 12 systems to teach the reality of colonization, and that settlers were not this glory, you know, little house on the prairie thing, but they were rapists and murderers and thieves, you know. And the reality has to be told, or else we're going to continue to perpetuate white supremacy and this hierarchical system of you know, science is a system of assimilation, just like religion and formal Western education. You know, we have to push past that and teach our children. We have to mentor our own Native peoples, number one. You know, we got to quit putting them in the hands of the colonizers and expecting them to be useful. We have to find that blend of both, right?
Right, right, definitely, and find that balance. And now with that blend of both, as we get ready to wrap up, what words come from the Shawnee that you might want to share, that might be those words of inspiration, or that would keep you going in a moment where you feel your spirit is taxed? What might you want to share with the audience?
Oh, I always like to pray and outside, you know, put your feet and hands in the soil or in the water. And in those moments, pray, you know, when you've got your hands in embracing the skin of our mother, and your feet in the water that is her blood and her tears and her sweat, you know, or that, you know, you are embraced by place, because place is a mentor. It is our mother. And it's in those moments that I always like to say, "Kokotana metele te Yahweh," which, you know, we recognize the creator of all things, the energy that is life, that is existence, that is consciousness, that is in everything. You know, if it has an electron, a neutron, and a proton, there's energy in there, and that is life. So a rock and a tree, all of it is an entity. And so praying in the environment that makes me feel loved back, that is to me the hope that I keep fighting for, is that there will always be a place where we can put our feet in the water and our hands in the soil, and the wind is in our hair, and the mother caresses us back. Those are the real moments of existence, that, you know, we're just spiritual beings learning to be human.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so happy that our human pathways keep crossing and overlapping. I always have good dialogues with you because you can think on your feet. You're ready for it. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate you being here to share amongst all the circle of different women that are gathering here on Zooming in on sustainability this month. Now, are you on social media? If someone wanted to find you on social media, do you deal with that at all or not?
Kind of. Um, since COVID, I think I've spent less time on social media because people are just struggling with mental health, and I don't want to be triggered, and I'm sensitive to the hate, and the whole Trump administration had my anxiety on a
Like we're talking
high.
about orange ran on here.
Yeah, and so I spend a lot more time in community, in home, reduced my footprint. But I do have a Twitter that I use occasionally, which is the letter NDN letters, cowgirl, Indian cowgirl, because I used to rodeo. And then my Paulette Blanchard, I have a Facebook, but I don't use it very often, mostly just to post cool stuff like this talk today.
I got you. I
So
got
Queen Quet, I just want to say I admire you so much, and I am so grateful for getting to know you and spending time laughing and sharing food in Hawaii and getting to visit with you at the National Adaptation Forum and other places. I am just so honored to know you. Thank you so much for the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate hearing that. And it's always wonderful to start to know, where did people meet me? Because I get to speak before. I've been blessed to speak before thousands of people.
Well, you are like, where's Waldo?
Wait, say that again.
You are like, well, where is Waldo? The character you're trying to find in the crowd because you're somewhere in the world.
Somewhere in the world, right? And I used to tell people that they used to play a game on my listserv where, when it was "Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?"
Yes.
They would play this game like, "Where in the world is Queen Quet?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm Carmen Sandiego now. That's how it is." Like, hey, if you don't know where you're gonna be emailing us from, you telling us you just landed over here someplace, and we thought you were this other place yesterday, because I was, so definitely it's funny now. I got both of those names now. So yeah, but it has been a blessed journey to just be in this circle of power of women who are not giving up, and who are definitely continuing to put their hands into the soil where the real soul is, to touch Mother Earth and have her touch us, and to keep us sustained. And I always tell folks, if we nurture Mother Earth, she'll continue to nurture us. And so that's why it is such a blessing to have all of you gather here today and be part of this circle. We appreciate all of you. Make sure that you go ahead and subscribe for free at gullahgeechee.tv, gullahgeechee.tv. Gullah is spelled Gullahgeechee is Geechee. Ain't a no I in Geechee if it a we. All right, so follow us at Gullah Geechee on Twitter, at Gullah Geechee on Instagram. Also follow the GullahGeecheeNation.com, GullahGeecheeNation.com. That way you can keep up with all the different things we're doing in our stand for land, and with our human rights fight for our indigenous rights and our cultural heritage rights as Gullah Geechees. Continue to follow us, support what we're doing. You can become members of the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition by going to gullahgeechee.net, gullahgeechee.net. And again, the books and things that I mentioned earlier, you can find those in the Gullah Geechee Nation flag and Gullah Geechee craft items at gullahgeechee.biz, gullahgeechee.biz. And if you're on Facebook, then make sure to follow the Gullah Geechee Nation on Facebook and Gullah Geechee TV on Facebook as well. And so, as always, I pray that all of you remain safe, remain in good health, continue to have peace in your hearts, but always continue to take a stand for the land. Trust me, know who honor to be and thing like that. And look, ya, it's your life thing. It ain't have to be such a hard journey. And so glad that Hunter Chillin tune in with we one more again. This year the Queen Quet, head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. So glad that you tune in and zoom in with we just a little while, but this your fight for the indigenous rights. Peace and blessings. The battle ain't over. Keep on fighting. Freedom fighters everywhere.